Alrighty. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm Samantha Studebaker Carl, broadcasting to you live from beautiful Southwest Georgia. I lost my train of thought there for a second. Welcome to everybody. I'm glad to have you on. And, wherever you are in the world, go ahead and comment on the page. Let us know where you're hanging out. And if you're brand new here, let me just kind of give you a little rundown of what we do here every week. Every week we get together. We're part of the community called Mindset Mastery Collective, and you can find us on Google+. And every week we get together and we study different books that help us become a better person or help us move forward in our lives, change our mindset, work on ourselves, become the best version of us that we can possibly be. And right now we're studying the book How to Win Friends and Influence People in the Digital Age. And we are on chapter, so everybody can kind of find their place while we're kind of doing introductions. We're in part 3 and chapter 3. Is that it? Yep, that's the one that says admit faults quickly and emphatically. So go ahead and find your place in the book. And in the meantime, everybody can kind of jump out, introduce themselves. For those of you that are on the page, go ahead and just say, hey, let us know where you're hanging out from in the world, and we can get this conversation going.
Hey everybody, this is Jason from Florida. Hey, sorry to jump out in front of you there, Dan.
That's fine. That's fine. Go for it.
Glad to be here. Glad to see everybody is on, and eager to get started talking about this.
Good morning. I'm Dan Smith. I live in Boise, Idaho, and welcome to the call.
Oops. Okay. Good morning, Sandy Root here in sunny Miami, and looking forward to today's hangout.
Okay. My computer's running a little bit slow, guys. I think there may be a slight delay in between me and everybody else. So if there's any long pauses, that's why. So again, just welcome everybody. And this week we're talking about this chapter called Admit Faults Quickly and Emphatically. And I called our event or our mastermind today, I gave it the title of How to Turn Your Biggest Mistakes or Your Worst Mistakes into Your Biggest Opportunities. And, one of the things that I learned in this chapter was that of course, I already had this in my mind, previously, but, basically the thing that teaches the biggest thing about this chapter is that when you admit that you've made a mistake to the people that it affects, is that you tend to get a better response from that person or those people than you would if you pretend like it didn't happen or try to blame it on someone else or just never admitted that it happened in the first place, any number of things. And so, one of the questions that I posed in our pre-mastermind discussion was, what was the story that had the biggest impact on you in this chapter, but also B was, why do you think it's so hard for people to admit when they've made a mistake? And so I'm real quick before we kind of start talking about stuff here, just jump over and sit with us this morning. Just give everybody a welcome. Welcome, Fabiana, Karen, Nadia, Better Than Average, Be Better Than Average, and Benone. Welcome, guys. And for those of you who haven't commented on the page, let us know where you're hanging out from in the world. And we'd love to hear from you. And also, jump in and add to the conversation. Let us know your thoughts on some of the things that we're talking about here. And then I'll also kind of read through. Danielle's not with us this week because she's got a conference that she's at. She kind of left some comments on our pre-mastermind discussion, so we'll sure and read through some of those. And then also we want to send out our healing thoughts to Catherine because she's not feeling so great, and just some warm love and just condolences to Vicky because she's attending a funeral for her friend's son. So I just wanted to kind of mention those things out there for everybody, and just let you all know that you're in our thoughts. We appreciate you, and before we move forward. So, and okay, so I just saw Rhonda popped up here. Welcome, Rhonda. Hello from the UK. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so guys, let's just start our conversation off with this kind of first couple of questions. Is why do you think it's so difficult for people to admit when they've made a mistake? What do you guys think? Who wants to jump out first?
I'll jump out. I think it's just human nature,
Okay.
I think it just boils right down to human nature. We don't want to look foolish or stupid, or we don't want to look like a screw up. Of course, I mean, I'm a Christian, so I read the scriptures, and I see in the book of Genesis where Adam and Eve ate of the forbidden fruit, and God asked them, well, how come you did this? And Adam says, well, the woman that you made and gave to me, she she talked me into it. And then he asked the woman, why did you do it? She said, well, the serpent deceived me. And I think that started it, and that's been thousands of years ago. Of course, that's just an opinion. That's where I come from, but that's just human nature. It just boils right down to we don't want to look like a dork or a foolish person in somebody else's eyes, and so we put band-aids on ourselves and try to. I mean, I know from my own personal experience, I want to look perfect in other people's eyes, and I don't want to look like that I'm a screw up. I want to look like in everybody's eyes like that. Every decision that I make is right, and that's not, and everything that I do is perfect, and it's not. And so, yeah, it's just. I think it just really boils down to the basic human nature of man, and it's just hard to admit that you've made a mistake. So I'll turn it over to somebody else.
Yeah. Those are some good points, Dan. I blame my parents. They're always telling me, when something was wrong, it was bad, and if I'm wrong, then I'm bad. So admitting I'm a mistake is admitting that I'm wrong, and that then I'm bad. So I think that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. What about you, Sandy?
I think that's a good point. We grow up a lot of times, a lot of us, with parents and society, not wanting us to really be wrong or express when we're wrong. For me, that was the case for sure. I had to be perfect, like Dan said. If you're not being portrayed as perfect out there, then, it's the end of the world. And I think a lot of it, too, is ego. There's that ego mind wants to be right, and it wants to be seen as right and perfect all the time. So if we admit our mistakes, our ego is like, excuse me, what are you doing? So, but yeah, I think that was a good point, Jason, that we grow up, a lot of us, like that, just being taught that it's wrong to be wrong. It's wrong to admit that we're wrong. And if we are wrong, a lot of times we get punished. If we admit we're wrong when we're kids, then we're getting punished for it. So it's just reinforced, like, okay, I can't be wrong. I can't show when I'm wrong. I have to hide it, or, so yeah, that's it for now.
Sorry about that, guys. I'm having problems flipping windows back and forth on my computer. I think you guys all make a lot of great points, and I think that we're talking about the Bible at the beginning, and how Adam and Eve and taking the forbidden fruit and all of that, and and I think that that's something that a lot of us are taught at the beginning, when we're young, is that these different beliefs that it's not okay to be wrong, it's not okay to do something that is incorrect. And when we get that kind of programmed into us, because everybody keeps telling us that, like you were saying, it's wrong to be wrong, or you get in trouble for doing something that you shouldn't do, or whatever, making any kind of mistake. I mean, even in school, I mean, we're taught throughout our whole entire time in school that if you make a mistake, you're a failure. I mean, that's what that big F is on your papers, you know, a failure. And nobody wants to be a failure, right? And so if we make a mistake, it's hard to admit, okay, we have failed. And, you know, and one of the things that strikes me is, of course, this is a bit of contradiction because we all know that we all make mistakes. I mean, that's part of life, is making mistakes. And when we admit that we've made a mistake, then it makes us more human in other people's eyes. So if we do these things and something happens and we made a mistake and we pretend like it didn't happen, it's actually more of a false thing. We're actually being more false when we don't admit that we've done is an incorrect action or or made some sort of a mistake than it is when we actually admit it. And so I think that we gain a huge amount of respect from other people just for that simple fact that we are strong enough in ourselves to admit that we've made a mistake, and that kind of helps to you know, make you actually look better in other people's eyes, because they're like, okay, well, if she can make a mistake and admit it, and she doesn't die, and nobody kills her, you know, it's just it's all okay, and you know, then okay, if I make a mistake, then maybe it's not such a bad thing, you know, and you can kind of own up to it, you could say. But I just, you know, I think that what you were saying, Jason, about, you know, always being told that you're bad, that's a huge thing with so many people, is that we grow up that way. We grow up being told that we're bad. And that, you know, and another thing, it's like with when we talk about a religion, you know, the Bible and those sorts of things, we're grown up taught, or we grow up being taught that if you make a mistake, or you are naturally a sinner, and because of the fact that you're doing wrong things, you're going to go to hell. You're going to burn in the fire of hell. And I think that's a huge thing right there too, is because if you think that, okay, if I make a mistake, God's going to rain, a huge thing that deters you from wanting to admit that you've ever done anything wrong, right? I think, do we have a big delay, don't we?
Yeah, you was busting up for a little bit. I don't know if you can hear me or not, but you like froze up for a little bit.
Okay, sorry about that. Right on.
That's a really good point there, Sam. Yeah, you bring it up a little bit, but it's okay. I mean, you're not so bad that we can't see you and hear you. I like what you're saying, and you know, there's some of these examples that they have in this chapter point out some different consequences, and also different scenarios that sort of shed some light on you know, how to handle it, and how, if you handle it quickly, if you apparently if you know, say you're sorry really quickly, then it makes it a lot easier than if you were to wait, and maybe even helps to do a little bit of damage control, and helps you to feel better about, you know, facing the fear. I think they talk about that as well.
You know, sometimes when we screw up in life, we're operating on the best information that we have at the time, and you know, you're constantly in a growing process. You know, from the time that you're born to the time that you die, you should be growing. You know, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. And you know, so I don't know about you guys, but I've done things before, and then you just afterwards, you know, something breaks or goes, you know, sideways on you or whatever, and you stand back and kind of, you know, hit yourself in the forehead. You say, what was I thinking? Why did I do that? That was stupid. That was the stupidest thing that you could have possibly done in the earth. You know, why did you do that? You know, and it makes absolutely zero sense, but you did it. You know, the wheels come off your life for a little while. You know, so you know, then you deal with it and you fix it. But then hopefully you learned a lesson, and you know, you can next time you're faced with a similar situation, hopefully you've learned a lesson to the point where you don't do that again.
Yeah, you look around, see if anybody saw you, huh?
Yeah.
Slip away.
Oh, that's good. Like, yeah. I think we've all asked ourselves at one point in time, what in the heck did I do that for? It just made absolutely no sense. But, at the time, for whatever reason, maybe we weren't thinking straight, or we didn't have all the information, or, who knows. And, but, let's talk a little bit about the different stories in this chapter. And one of the stories that I thought was just a really, really good one was the story about the umpire making, a bad call in the baseball game, and it was the pitcher had almost pitched a pretty much perfect game, and the last call the umpire made, it was incorrect, but, during the game, he couldn't uncall it, I guess. I don't know the rules of baseball, but basically what it boiled down to is after the game was over, the umpire went back and looked at the video and realized he'd made an incorrect call. I think that a lot of times in those situations, most people are just like, I'm just going to pretend like it didn't happen, or whatever. And instead, he was kind of like the bigger person, and he went to the pitcher and he was like, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake and I wish I could undo it. And and he didn't make excuses about it. I think that's the other thing is that when you make a mistake and you say I'm sorry, but then you turn around and you go, but I did it because this happened, or like Eve blamed it on the serpent, and Adam blamed it on Eve. It's not my fault. Yeah, I made that mistake, but it's not my fault. But when you actually own up to the fact that, yeah, you are responsible for everything that you do, and you're responsible for your actions, even though you made a mistake. Not blaming it on others, that's a huge thing too, is that we're afraid to totally take responsibility for our own actions, and I think that story in and of itself was just a really great example of how that the whole attitude of the pitcher, I'm sure, changed at that moment. I mean, he was so mad that it had happened, and I don't blame him, because I mean, that's a career thing, that if you pitch a perfect game, that gives you all of this I don't know, it gives it makes you more of a professional in that industry, and makes you look really good. But that pitcher, or the umpire, because he made the wrong call, ruined that for him, And so I can see how upset the pitcher would have been at the umpire, and just by the umpire going and say, I'm so sorry, I made a mistake, and it completely diffuses the situation. I mean, the pitcher may still be a little upset about it, but at least it would take some of that anger away from him. Because, I think that a lot of times people, when they make a mistake and somebody doesn't own up to it, you almost have this kind of like this pent-up anger towards that person, because you know that they made a mistake. Why don't they just admit it, And so it's hard to continue a relationship with anybody in your life, if you don't clear the air, if you will. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's funny because a lot of times we automatically want to cover it up or find the best way to blame it on something else or someone else, and find a way to not admit that we were wrong. And when I'm thinking of people who don't admit that they're wrong versus ones that admit when they're wrong, like, I have so much more respect for the ones who can say, yeah, I was wrong, I made a mistake. Like, for those people, I think we all feel that way, when someone's like that, they have more integrity, you feel that they're more honest, they're more in touch with themselves, and so there's just a lot more respect when somebody can admit that they made a mistake. And like you said, Samantha, like, it diffuses the situation. If someone did something that was wrong and they don't admit it, it just leaves this lingering feeling towards them doesn't feel good. And if they have admitted their mistake, then there's a way better feeling of respect, that someone could admit that they did something wrong. So yeah, that's my thoughts for now.
Yeah, I agree. Over the years, I mean, I'm not really super highly politically minded, but nevertheless, you watch the news at night and you see the different politicians that are on, and different scandals over the years that politicians have been caught in, and that it's not uncommon when the rare politician does step forward and say, you know what, yeah, I own this, I screwed up, and then the people forgive them, and their career goes right on. And when I was reading this chapter last night and thinking about it, I wrote a little bit about it in a pre-mastermind, but President Clinton comes to my mind, that with the Monica Lewinsky thing, that, I mean, he looked right in the camera and says, I did not have sexual relationships with that woman, and it wasn't until she threatened to come forward with a dress that had his DNA all over it, before he finally, well, maybe I did, but I mean, he kind of skated through the whole thing, but just, it's not just him. I mean, I'm not just pinning all of life on him or anything like that, but I have noticed it over the years that politicians that will come forward and get it out in the air real early on, that the people will forgive them much, much, much faster, and they can soar to new heights in politics, where the ones that just really dig in their heels and blame everything on everybody else, that there's a lot of politicians that was going to run for president that you don't hardly remember their names today because they got caught up in some kind of a scandal, and they tried to say that it didn't happen until it was just forced on them to finally admit that it did happen. And so, I mean, that's just a big example, and then there's the example of a little kid with cookie crumbs around their mouth, and mom asks them, did you get in a cookie jar? And they say no. That was me when I was a kid. So, anyway, yeah, I'll turn it over to somebody else.
I think that our inability to, say that we're sorry sometimes. I think sometimes we're just, we're, like you said earlier, we're in shock that we've even made the mistake. Sometimes, when it comes to our attention, and then we're in disbelief, then we're in grief, you know, and we forget that there may be someone else involved, or a whole community involved, or our fans or whatever, at least for those initial moments. And I mean, the longer you go without apologizing or realizing your mistake, or at least giving that acknowledgement like the umpire did, um, the harder it gets, I think. And um, I guess it just doesn't look as good as if you were to catch your mistake right away and let people know. But yeah, I mean, definitely just at least acknowledging it and trying to put yourself in from another person's point of view, even if even if the apology is a little late. I think it's a whole lot better than never, for sure. 'Cause you never know when you're going to get a chance to say that apology. So I guess actually it's probably best to do it as quickly as possible before that person walks away, and you might not come in contact with them for a long time. So I actually had an experience recently where I kind of barked off at someone because they were irritating me, and they caught me in a bad mood, and I had reason to be upset with them in the past, but not this particular time. And it was really completely my fault, for just being in a bad mood and being caught off guard. And it really bothered me too. I knew this discussion was coming up, and I was trying to figure out, just like, what. I actually went really deep into the situation to figure out what was my fault, what was his fault, what was, why am I so upset now when it really doesn't, and I realized I was carrying over feelings from another incident over into this. And days went on and I didn't see this person, and I was feeling bad, and I was feeling like, gosh, I really would like to apologize to him. Now I can't. And like, it became a me situation again. Come on, where are you? I want to apologize to you. And but I was going through this grief, and this is kind of the flip side of the coin. But I was kind of going through the grief, and then the other day I saw him. He just stopped by and just came over for a little bit, and it didn't. The whole situation it wasn't even on his mind. You know, it was more of a issue with me, and it would have helped me to move on and move forward if I had said my apology quicker. For him, he had just moved on, accepted it, moved on, and went about his life. But for me, it was actually became sort of a stumbling block. So, you know, you never know, I guess. You may not even be hurting others, but you might be hurting yourself just by, you know, having that unresolved issue. What do you guys think?
I
Yeah,
think great point. You know, that, yeah, a lot of times if we feel we did something really wrong, we'll internalize it so strongly and beat ourselves up for days over it. And, you know, I've had situations like that for sure where I'm like kicking myself and I'm like, I can't even go outside. I can't see people. What do they think of me? And then, you know, I go out and nobody remembers or cares. And I'm like, you know, that it's a good, also to look within in those situations too, and where what are we needing to learn, and you know, it's a great growth process too when we feel so wrong in this situation. You know, what is it stemming from? And yeah, it was good that I like that you connected it to a past incident too, because a lot of times, you know, we just have to look at why am I feeling so horrible about this, and no one else really notices. But yeah, good point.
Yeah, I've experienced that a number of times where I just felt awful about something that I said or did, and call people up and say, "Look, you know, I'm really sorry." You know, and they just, "What? What are you even talking about?" So, turn over to you, Samantha.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I think that happens a lot. Is you know, we into it, and it's more of a thing with us than it is with anybody else. But one thing that I will say on that subject, you know, if we're talking about intimate relationships, you know, relationships with husbands, wives, or close, you know, family, sisters, brothers, mothers, you know, that sort of thing, is that I think in those kinds of situations is that over time, all those little things tend to add up. And if you have not said you're sorry, even if it's been a while, or maybe you feel like it's more an issue for you than it is for that other person, or maybe they think it is, or whatever, is just, you know, saying that you're sorry, even if it's a little thing, can make a huge difference in your overall relationship. Because I think that what happens is, like you were saying, Jason, is that, you know, that other person, you know, he had just accepted it and he was moving on. But if we're talking about a long-term relationship with a spouse, or, you know, sister, parent, thing like that, is over time, all those little things would eventually add up and cause, you know, potential resentment towards one another, or those sorts of things, you know. And I'll kind of give you an example. You know, last night I got upset with my husband. It was just something really super stupid and simple, and I yelled at him. And you know, it wasn't like an end of the world argument or anything like that. But you know, when I got up this morning, I was sitting there thinking, the stupidest thing. I don't know why I yelled at him. Like, you know, Dan was saying, why in the world did I do that, right? You know, and even though I know that he knows that I didn't mean it, I still told him on, you know, when we were driving up here, I was like, I still told him I was sorry. I apologized for yelling at him, and just those little things over a period of time help keep a relationship stronger, just because of the fact that you don't end up internalizing it on your end, or the other person doesn't continue to internalize it on their end as well. So I think that's super important. What do you guys think about it as far as, you know, with long-term relationships?
I think that's a terrific point. You know, it's totally different when you're dealing with your fans or your family, or even admitting to yourself. You know, I totally agree with you, Samantha. It's if you know, when you're in a relationship, those little things can pile up. So I wouldn't bet on I wouldn't bet on the person just getting over it without you saying you're sorry and discussing it. it's always better to, go ahead and discuss it. Go ahead and apologize. I'm not saying we shouldn't apologize, but I was just bringing up that point that, sometimes we're actually putting ourselves through some grief that we could avoid by going ahead and apologizing. Um, and also, it gives us our power back if we allow ourselves to accept our own faults, and then admit our mistake. And seems to me that opens up the communication to talk about why it happened. Not that you're giving a reason, an excuse for it, but I would, say that I was really actually very concerned that I had, just completely misspoke to this person, and wanted to say I was sorry, and I, wanted to accept that responsibility, as well as talk to them about why I was in that bad mood or why it took me by surprise. Because I think we all still need to communicate the reasons, even if we're not giving those as excuses. Um, so I don't think I guess my point is that by apologizing, we're actually opening up the channels for communication, and rather than how it seems to, like, sometimes it may initially feel like we're cutting ourselves off. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, those are good points. Definitely, it helps a relationship when you can be open like that. And yeah, like you said, it initially it can feel like, well, what if they hate me for admitting this, or the little bit of fear of like bringing that up to rehash it, and the fear of them like not wanting to be your friend or whatever anymore. And but this, I've shared in the past a couple times when I stayed with my mom, that we were butting heads, and now I'm seeing that this was a big part of it. Neither of us could ever admit anything wrong about in our past. It was like we're just blaming each other for everything, and you did this, you did that, and I don't think we've ever said anything to each other like, you know what, I was wrong, or I'm sorry. Those things we just haven't shared. It's like we're just battling how this one did this and this one did this, and this is why this is this way. And I think this is an important conversation for me, because now when I do see my mom, maybe I can implement more of this, like admitting my past mistakes and allowing her to have that space to admit hers too. And I think that will help our relationship a lot. So yeah, good points.
I think, I'm trying to formulate my thoughts here. I had talked about it a week or two ago, but I used to try to avoid any type of conflict to the point where things would build up and build up and build up to the point where I would explode, and then whoever I went off on would be like, "Whoa, dude, where'd that come from?" But so it kind of gets to be like a dam, and it's holding back, all this stuff, and when I ran my painting company, I had all these employees, and that happened fairly frequently with employees. It's just, that I would allow them to get away with stuff that really annoyed me and really upset me, but I didn't really want to create a conflict. And then in my mind, I would kind of go, well, I don't really like that, but it's not 100% hurting anything, But then when it would come to a certain point, then yeah, I would go off on them, and I'd explode, and then I feel like a jerk, and have to actually end up, apologizing for a situation that really should have been dealt with when it was real small, before it got blew out of all proportion, and I don't know, like I say, I'm trying to figure out how to formulate my thoughts, and I'm kind of rambling. I apologize for that, but yeah, just I guess just taking care of business, when it's small before it gets blown out of proportion, and whether that means that you got to apologize for them, but sometimes it gets to the point where it's like, well, how come I'm the person that always has to apologize, because this is a two-way street here, and, so anyways, yeah, I'll turn it over to someone else.
I think that's a great point, Dan. Particularly when we're talking about relationships, is it's so easy to, if you're not somebody who wants to, or who, if you're somebody who likes to avoid arguments and avoid conflict and that sort of thing, it can be really difficult dealing with people who won't admit that they've made a mistake, or people that are frustrating to you for one reason or another, and what's interesting to me in that situation is that, if those people would just admit, okay, I made a mistake, or I did this, or whatever it is that we wouldn't even, that over time building up of frustration or resentment or upset at that person would never even happen, But yet, because we've kind of been told all along as young people that, if you do something wrong, you're going to be in trouble, is that you're less likely to, come forward and say, okay, yeah, I made a mistake, and as kids, we experienced this a lot, at least I did, is that, when I was young, I lied a lot, because I was afraid of getting in trouble. I didn't want to get in trouble for throwing that rock and whatever happening, but as I got older, I started to realize that, when I would be found out, it would be so much worse than what it was if I had just said, okay, yeah, it was me, I did it, I'm the one that broke that flower, or that flower pot, or whatever it was, and it was so simple that when when I became a teenager, I got into some really deep trouble with some friends. We went and we drove a car. I didn't have my driver's license. I let somebody else drive who didn't have their driver's license. It was someone else's car entirely, and then and the car got wrecked. And we took out a guardrail, and luckily nobody else was involved except for us, but we ran away from the car, left it on the side of the road, and we were like, oh my God, how are we going to cover this up? And we had this big ordeal because we were so afraid of getting in trouble, even though, it was one of those situations where it was going to be found out one way or another. Everybody knew whose car that was, they knew who we were, we knew where we had been, and all of those kinds of things, and so, I had we had this 40-minute walk from the car back to our house to think about what we were going to do, and the whole time I'm going, okay, I have to get home, I have to tell my parents, because if I don't tell my parents and they find out about this, I am going to be dead, I'm going to be so dead. And, of course, then when I went home and I told my parents, I was like, I have something to tell you. I've done something not good, and you're going to be really unhappy with me, but please don't kill me. And, and then once I told them what happened, they had their faces were red and they were really upset, but, they stood behind me on helping to resolve the situation. And I thought, that's a perfect example of, when you come forward and you say, okay, I made this mistake, I did this thing, I screwed up, and you come clean to the people that are close to you in your life or that are affected by this thing that you have done. If there's something that needs to be resolved, then you come together and you resolve it together. And which I think is when you were talking about the politicians, and when they've made a mistake or done something they shouldn't have done or whatever, and they come forward and they say, okay, they own it, and they're like, okay, I did this, I screwed up, it was the wrong decision to make or whatever, then everybody kind of bands together and they're like, okay, well, shit happens, let's fix it, let's figure out a way to fix it, and then that person gains all this huge respect. Danielle mentioning in the pre-mastermind discussion about President Reagan and how he was good about coming forward and saying I made a mistake, and I'm like, and I think he was one of the more well-loved presidents of a long period of time, And I think that that's a huge example that he set for the rest of everybody else, is that, you know, if you make a mistake, yeah, it sucks. We don't want to make mistakes. We don't want to screw things up. But when we do, it just kind of reminds everybody else, okay, I'm human. We're all human. We all make mistakes. And let's figure out a way to solve this together. What do you guys think?
I love the the car story. Just made me think of you know, those things in childhood when you do something wrong and it's just like, dear, just it's the end of the world. Really, you're like terrified that you're gonna be killed by your parents, and just remembering all the silly things I did that, you know, where just for days you're trying to cover things up and your whole energy is consumed in it. And, you know, if it's like that when you're a child, and, you know, when we're an adult and we're trying to cover something up, it's sucking our energy, it's draining our energy. And it's such a relief when we can just admit what we did. It's such a relief, because otherwise we're just consumed in our mind of like, I did this and I need to cover it up and nobody can notice. But yeah, that's it for now. I'm losing my train of thought.
Yeah, that reminds me of some stories when I was a kid too. I took my mom's car when I wasn't supposed to, and I backed into somebody else's car when I was at a girl's house that I wasn't supposed to be, and I didn't tell her. And the guy wanted his car fixed and had to turn into an insurance, so I didn't tell my mom for like 2 weeks. And you know, the proverbial defecation hit the fan, or the oscillator. So I wasn't laughing at you when you told that story. I was laughing with you. So, yeah, it would probably been a lot better if I had told my mom right that same day, but I chose to wait for like 2 weeks. So I'm done.
Yeah, Dan, you may not apologize to your parents. They'll always love you, but they'll make you feel sorry. Make you feel sorry you did it. I thought the example of the no hitter being ruined. I mean, in baseball, you know, an umpire, when he makes a bad call, that's just too bad. They're not going to change it. That's part of the sport, you know. Whereas all these other sports, they don't. They'll change. You know, they look at the reviews and they'll change the call. I think baseball's getting a little bit better at it, but that's part of the whole sport, is that the ump's calls are part of the game, and if the ump gets it wrong, then that's just the way it is. That umpire didn't have to go say he was sorry, but just by acknowledging that, it probably saved him so much grief and probably really quieted the storm so much. We'll never know, but you know, there were still a lot of people that were upset about that. But boy, he made, you know, lo siento. There's 2 words, and they can make a big difference. I'm sorry.
Absolutely, you know, and I think that, I think that we've all made, you know, terrible mistakes and minor mistakes and kind of in the middle mistakes, and you know, when we can admit them, it makes things go so much smoother, you know. And I'll kind of give an example, another one. I've made lots of mistakes. I'll admit it, you know. It's part of life, right? And, you know, when a couple of years ago I was driving a dump truck, and I had to, something was going on with the truck. I don't even remember what the situation was, but I pulled over and I checked the oil, and the oil was low. And so I got out this jug of what I thought was oil and poured it in the engine, right? Well, it turned out it wasn't oil, it was antifreeze, and I didn't realize it until I had poured some out, and I, like, I don't know, picked the gallon up or whatever and looked, and it was coming out green, and I was like, oh shit. And what's interesting is in this, in that kind of industry is that, of course, being a woman, that's a male-dominated industry, and and being a representative for women in a male-dominated industry it can be really difficult because everybody thinks you can't do the job, you don't know what you're doing, and all of those kinds of things. And I could have just been like, I don't know. I have no idea why it's running funny, or whatever. I could have just pretended like I didn't do that, and I have no idea what the problem is with the truck. And what's interesting is that that's pretty much the typical attitude of most drivers out there, is that something goes wrong with it and they won't take any responsibility for it, even though they're the ones driving it all the time. They're the ones responsible for it. And of course, when I made that mistake and I saw what I had done, the first thing I did is I was on the phone to the boss going, man, I totally screwed up. I don't know what to do. Tell me. I'm so sorry. And and he was like, it's okay. It's not the end of the world, because of course in a big truck, it takes like many gallons of oil, and so that one half a gallon of antifreeze was not the end of the world, but it was just, it was one of those situations where, if I had ignored the problem or pretended like it didn't happen and just kept on driving the truck down the road, and then the engine blew up, that would have been like a $10,000 or more mistake, and and I think that this is kind of something that happens a lot of time in many business industries. Is somebody makes a mistake, they don't own up to it, and it turns into a major disaster that can have a huge effect on the company. And but yet, if you just come forward and you say, hey, this is the problem, this is what happened, I did it, it's this or whatever, just like we've kind of talked about already, is that then everybody kind of can come together to fix the problem rather than just letting it escalate and become worse and worse and worse. That's my thought process on there. So we can all just come out and tell some of our mistakes. That'll be a good one.
If we don't admit our mistakes, then what are the alternatives? Living in denial, or having to, if we want to keep our mistakes secret, then we end up creating lies to cover them up, or especially when it involves someone else. Well, no, just yeah, it's a slippery slope, I think. So I guess it's definitely the best policy to go ahead and admit your mistake as fast as possible, get it out of the way, maybe even make a joke about it. I always find it funny when people apologize in advance. Like, hey, I'm here. I'm sorry, I'm gonna screw this up. Bear with me. Get it out in the open. Yeah. So, what do you guys think? I'm not hearing Dan. Can you guys
Yeah,
hear
you're
me?
muted, Dan, if you were trying to talk.
How about now?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. Yeah, I think just getting it out in the open, something I work on is not taking myself quite so seriously, because I can have a tendency to go over into that camp, and to just take myself way too serious when
I think we lost Dan, but you
oh,
there? Oh,
you're not hearing me?
you're
Okay.
good.
Okay. Yeah. There must be a big delay. Yeah, just not taking myself quite so seriously, and it's easy for me to forgive other people, but sometimes you gotta forgive yourself as well, and say, hey, I am human too, and so it's easy for me to forgive this person. I need to forgive myself, and move on. We all make mistakes. We're all human. We're all going to screw something up. We're all going to make a mistake, and just confess up to it and forgive others. But I also think it's really important to forgive yourself, and to recognize that you know, like I said earlier, maybe you're doing the best you can do with the information that you have at that time, but we're all in a learning process and in a growth curve, hopefully. And so if you screw up, then, you know, admit you're wrong and say, hey, I'm sorry, can you forgive me? And forgive ourselves, you know, and then move forward from there. So I am done.
I can think of quite a few people in my past that I would like to say I'm sorry to. If I ever see them again, I will make the attempt. Um, of course, they'll probably have moved on and not, you know, they're not worried about it at this point, but you know, a little too late. But but yeah, that's holding on to that or not apologizing has probably only caused me the grief over the long term. Uh, but still, you know, I'm sorry. Maybe it only helped myself be okay with it. You know, a few things here and there that I've done that by accident or just being oblivious to someone else's feelings, and you know, those kind of get in your craw, and I guess if that's the right word, but you get, you know, they get up in your throat, and you kind of, it's hard to come out of, you know, and say it at first, and then later it's, you know, it's can be you know, a real problem getting over it. Um, oh, I suggest we all, since I've tried to be more apologetic. I have this one friend who's really good at setting up his conversations, even the slightest thing with an apology or a, you know, or you know, excuse me, or may I ask you a question, or he's just really good at at doing that to begin with, and he's being around him has helped me at least take notice and try to recognize my flaws and my mistakes right away. Um, so, you know, I apologize for running on and on like this. Um, you know, what about you, Sandy, out there in warm Miami?
I just was reminded of a conversation I had this week with an ex-boyfriend, and we used to, he called because he wanted some sense of closure. And we used to, you know, be very, or he would be very much, well, he was right. What he did was right, and I was wrong. And it made me come back like that. Well, no, I'm right, and you're wrong. And it was nice. We were on the phone for 3 hours, but we were able to admit where we were. We were in that time. We were together for a reason. We learned from it. You know, maybe I was wrong here, maybe, and he was admitting where he was wrong. And you know, we're seeing it from a different perspective now because we've grown from it and can look back at it and be like, wow, you know, we were in this situation in a sort of immature kind of way. And so really, there's such a good feeling now. Like, I had such immense anger at this guy a couple years ago, and like this feeling of like I could never forgive him. And I think when we can admit our wrongnesses and have other people admit it, there's even a greater capacity to forgive. And I feel like I completely forgive him now, and because that's where we were, and I forgive myself because I did things that weren't, you know, correct all the time either. And so it really opened a different door, and I feel this love for him now that before the thoughts would just be like, ah, and now it's like, ah. So it can shift things big time when people just be real and admit the things and where they were and the wrongnesses, and can change a relationship immensely. So, yeah.
That's awesome, Sandy. I'm glad to hear that you were able to have that with him and be able to, you know, work through those things in the past, because I know that can be a huge release of a burden that you know, even if it's not something we're thinking about every day, but those past relationships have such a huge impact on who we are. And when you can work through those, I think that can make a huge step in your personal development. And so I think that's awesome. You know, and you know, I think that it kind of holds true in long relationships too. It's like with with my husband and I mean, we had some issues in the past, and just the fact that we were able to work through them, and it's made us a stronger couple. Even now, and when silly things like it wasn't even an argument, it was just me yelling at him for no good reason. When stuff like that happens, then you get through it easier, and I think just because you've been through things before and you admit that you're wrong and you admit that you've made a mistake, then working through those things in the future becomes easier. Oh, but one thing I wanted to say about what you were talking about, Jason, and how your friend is really good at opening conversations and being apologetic and whatnot. And I think that this is a good example of how when you admit your mistakes and you come forward and you say that you were wrong, is that how people gain a huge amount of respect for you, and because then all of a sudden you are an example of you admitted you were wrong, and so therefore you kind of end up being on the same level as everybody else, because we make mistakes, and so when you admit, okay, I'm a mistake maker, obviously it makes you seem more human or more relatable, and then people respect you more, and so they kind of look up to you as an example of who they want to be more like. And I think that is a huge thing in as far as turning your mistakes into opportunities, is what I kind of originally named Hangout. And so I just kind of keep that in mind, is that when you admit to your mistakes and you apologize and you come forward, as that people gain a huge amount of respect for you that you might not otherwise have. And if you don't, then it goes the opposite. People lose respect for you, especially if they know that you were the cause of the problem in the first place and it affected a lot of people, and you don't come forward, or even if you do, or you're put on the spot, you just blame everybody else, then it just causes people to lose respect for you. So that's just some things for everybody to think about this week. And I just want to thank everybody for hanging out with us. We're right here at the top of the hour, and I think that we probably could have talked about this for quite a bit longer. Actually, we didn't even have a chance to read some other comments from our pre-mastermind discussion, or I had a couple people make comments on some other posts related to this topic earlier this week too. But I do want to thank everybody who has contributed to the conversation, even if we didn't have a chance to talk about your thoughts and whatnot. We do appreciate you, and we look forward to connecting with you in the future. Everybody come out and visit us in the mindsetmasterycollective.com. That's our Google Plus community. And unless you guys have something else you want to add before we wrap this up, we are right at the top of the hour. Any final thoughts? Nope.
Well, I think
All right.
just one more thought. If I said at the beginning, I blame my parents for making me think that apologizing is bad, and because it means we made a mistake. But after talking with you, it's clear it's actually also an opportunity to strengthen your relationship with whomever you might have wronged. And so, I'm going to go forward thinking of it as an opportunity and not fear it, but, use it as an opportunity to, like Dan said and Sandy said, to grow and strengthen that relationship. So thank you. Thanks for all your inputs. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Awesome, Jason. Excuse me, my throat's kind of getting. Anyway, I'm glad to hear that this conversation has helped you, and I hope that it helps everybody else out there as well. And for those of you who have a thought and you want to add to the conversation, you can always add something on our event page or jump over to our community and add your thoughts there. And okay, we've got somebody commenting on the page. Rhonda says, thank you to all. Thank you, Rhonda. Glad to have you hanging out with us this morning. Alrighty. Let me get back over here. Okay, so with that, I would just want to say thanks for hanging out. Have a great day, and meet us again next week, Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern, and you can always find us at SaturdayMorningMastermind.com. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.